Okay, we're good to go.
All right, we'll start our police commission meeting for May the 7th, 2020. It's a little over 2 p.m. The two things I'm going to ask you to do, and it's so the meeting will flow. If you want to speak, address the chair for one. And what I'm going to do, instead of asking all in favor, all opposed, I'll just ask, is there anyone opposed? All right, is everybody okay with that?
Sure.
Right. Okay. The agenda, before we go on to the agenda, is there anything that anybody would like added? Don, did you want to add something to it?
Well, no, the chief and I have already spoken, and perhaps he'll speak to it a little later. It was just a tool that I discovered on domestic violence and so on. So okay. He has the information.
I can see everybody, so if you just raise your hand when I ask, and I can. So I'm going to ask for an approval of the agenda. Bryan, Commissioner Atkinson's made a motion, and Commissioner Taylor seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Thought you were going to ask that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
All right, you're right. I'm damn broke my own rule. Thanks for keeping me in line. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Hoback, and he's going to speak on the incident we had last week, the unfortunate incident. And Chief did know the police officer that lost their life, so I'll turn it over to Chief Hoback.
Thank you. I really just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge the incredible loss of life that the province has gone through in the last couple of months. And in particular, with that incident a couple of weeks ago involving Constable Heidi Stevenson, you know, as police officers, every time we put on our uniform, we know the risk that's involved with that on a day-to-day basis, as does our family. But it really doesn't hit home until something like that happens that's so close to us. You know, it's devastating for her family, the police family in general, and the province and the country as a whole. And Heidi gave her life in the ultimate sacrifice to protect her community and the people around. So I wanted to acknowledge that and in this forum. So that's it.
I'm going to ask now then that we have 1 minute of silence. What I'd like to say is that, you know, it's quite often you hear the statement that police in small towns, small areas aren't in danger. Their job is not as dangerous as Halifax or maybe Ontario or Toronto. But I think this here certainly opens up and shows that there's dangers no matter where they're at. And, you know, I want to thank Donnie, Commissioner Taylor for texting me and reminding me to, you know, bring this up. But certainly a sad event, and all our officers are you know, are prone to this. Doesn't matter how big a town, you know, and certainly from looking at the individual, it sounds like he had some really deep issues. Is there anybody else who wants to say anything? Moving on to the next one, can I ask for an approval of the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Commissioner Terrace, seconded by Commissioner Atkinson. I haven't heard any objection. Motion carried. Business arising from the minutes. Is there any business arising from the minutes? All right, we'll move on. The monthly activity report. Does the chief or Inspector Pond want to speak on it or highlight it or?
Well, we have, I think, probably have two before you, since we didn't have a meeting last month. The calls for, the report for March as well as the report for April. I don't know that there's really much in them that's unique or outstanding, other than the fact that April was a very busy month. We had, I think, over 120 calls for service, which is a fairly high number for this time of year.
154. Yeah, it was 154,
Oh,
Chief.
yeah. Yeah, 125, the number of occurrences plus the unknown, so 154. So that is an extremely busy month for us. You know, and in spite of what people may think, they weren't all, or a lot of them weren't COVID related. We had, numerous COVID related calls. A lot of them were unfounded, were made by anonymous callers, and by the time we investigated them, they were unfounded. So with that, I don't know that we have a section on there. We don't specific to that, but I can tell you that there have been 6 COVID-related tickets issued, and as far as specific number of offenses investigated, I'd say probably about 20 offenses investigated, and generally speaking, most of them were unfounded. So that's really kind of the highlights of that report, both of them really.
Thank you. One of the things.
I'd like to make a couple of observations.
Go ahead, Commissioner Taylor.
Okay, I noticed that in the month of March, we had 10 mental health calls, and for April, it was 4. And then the assaults, there was a great many assaults in both months, 5 in April and 4 in May, and 2 were on police officers. We don't really break down domestic violence, do we, in a different category? It's always under another umbrella, is it not?
Chief, you want to speak to that?
I can't hear you, Chris.
We can't hear you, Chris. You have Inspector Pond. You have to come closer to the mic.
When the call originally comes in, it gets labeled as family violence, but once the officer deems it to be, whether it be a mischief or an assault, it goes under that category. So for future, we could note it, but when it goes out in the report, there's no category for it, no.
Yeah, I just think it might be useful in that we know by all the TV reports and all the experts saying that where we're locked down in this COVID issue, and it will likely continue for a while, that domestic violence is on the spike up, and it might be helpful to see if there's a particular area where things are going south. But I suspect it's going to be widespread. The longer everybody sticks together, the more chances there is. Because getting out to work is actually a relief valve for that kind of thing.
There's, excuse me,
yeah,
there's just an interesting note of that, Commissioner Taylor, because I agree with you, and so do many others. Under our REMO updates, the Regional Emergency Measures Office, we have briefings, and one of the agenda items on that list is to check in with organizations that deal with vulnerable communities. And we have dealt with the local vulnerable community that deals with domestic violence, the Tierman House. And for some reason, whether it is COVID related, they don't think it's open, or this is the first time in 20 years they have been empty. That was
Is that right? That's very
that was, yeah, that was very shocking to everyone, and there are no doubt issues that is creating. Like I said, some of the thoughts may be that people don't know they're open, they're afraid to go out due to COVID. So with our REMO team, we're looking at somehow making sure that people know that service is still available, and the doors are open for anyone that. And there's also the issue of transportation and potentially getting there. So yeah, that is certainly, it's, while it's a concern when there's people there, it's also a very big concern when there's not people there.
Based on everything that I've read and seen and so on, it sounds like the great escape is usually when the husband or the perpetrator of the crime is not there. Then they can put a few things together and have an escape plan. But if everybody's stuck in the house, then you're kind of stranded there. So the tool that I sent to the chief, it was from the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. It was produced in 2016, and there was some pretty decent stuff in there as I read through it that I think might be able to be utilized. And Chief Hobeck said that Chris Pond is your liaison for that. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, between Chris and Paul Venus.
Paul Venus, yes. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
right.
Paul handles the files here, but Chris sits on the board.
Okay, it's just, I don't know, I mean, I'm looking at this layperson. Police officer might be able to see more things than I do, or less things than I do, but I just think we need to be as proactive as we can, to be preventative as we can, being a small town and community policing and so on. It'd be terrible to think that residents are trapped in their homes and scared to death and can't find a way out. And I believe that social services are tending to be distancing as well because of the COVID thing. So it's not like they can move into a house like they used to. So a whole different set of rules. And I just think it's an important issue that we should be focused on if there's something in addition that we can do.
Chief, you and I had a conversation when it first started here. Maybe you could explain it just so it gets out in the general public, but you talked about the cooperation between the police forces here in Pictou County and how you guys have been communicating with one another and backing one another up, and in case of an emergency or our police force are down numbers. You maybe want to speak on that?
Sure. When this started, we met with the neighboring towns and our local RCMP detachments just to kind of come up with a strategy on what we can do in our own county in the event that some of our officers, whether it's here, Westville or New Glasgow or the RCMP, start getting sick, how we can help each other out. So each agency kind of has their own internal plan on staffing and resource management on how they're handling things, but collectively we came to an agreement that we would endeavor to assist each other on as many calls as we can, and in the event that we're down numbers, that we would share resources in order to make it more effective, rather than trying to bring in people from, if it's the RCMP helping out, they're going to have to reallocate resources from either the province or from outside the province to bring in to assist towns that need it. So collectively we came to that agreement. And also with respect to community services, they're still doing what they do. They're just trying to, as we are, triage the calls a little bit better, so as they don't have to go out into the public and make as many interactions as they had been in the past, if possible. If necessary, they will, and we go with them on those type of calls when it involves children as well. So, and a little further on the domestic violence piece, the province did put out something to all agencies and have sent us to them. And I'm going to hold it up, and I know you can't see this, but just so you know what size it's card size, and it's basically a guide and checklist for operational use when you have a domestic call. Just things to cover as far as perception of risk, and if there's access to firearms, there's a domestic violence investigative checklist and a safety planning piece to it, which seems like a lot on small cards, but it's fine print. So that is something the province has as an initiative this year, is to with domestic violence. And as far as the calls go with us, the computer system we use is PROS, and there's no section or no heading in PROS for domestic violence, which I don't understand, but there isn't. So what we do is monthly, we can go through our calls and we basically backtrack through the assaults and have to read through every call and see if it's domestic related. So we can get those numbers. It's just a little bit more challenging than just searching a certain heading in the system. And it's not unique to us either. That's consistent with this system right across the province.
Good to know. Thank you.
The other thing I want to bring up is I had a conversation with Pat Dunn's office here last week and maybe week before, but I was speaking with Brenda Wilson, and she was praising Sergeant Venus and how he cooperated with their office and how he conducted himself with an incident that they had. So I'd just like to note that publicly. Can we have a motion? We'll group the two, if anybody, unless somebody has an objection, we'll group the two reports together and pass them.
I just have a questions for the chief first, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I just wanted to thank the police department for, I noticed that in the community relations, they visited the GR Sons. They also went to Bridgeway Academy as well. So thank you for including Bridgeway in that and getting all our students here in Stellarton. I noticed the foot patrol hours down quite a bit. Is that due to COVID or time of year, or?
Sir, it's probably a little bit of both. When COVID started, what I did was I made a suggestion to the members that we try to limit our public interactions as best we could. And that meant checkpoints. It meant, approaching people on the street, whether it's foot patrol or just out of their vehicles. So we're trying to limit our contact. And now as things start to open up again, you'll see those hours start to increase, and we'll start being more interactive with the community. I can also say to that with we kind of modified our shifts a little bit to support that and to keep the members from too much contact with not only each other, but the community. And as a result of that, we were somewhat limited in what we could do with respect to the foot patrol side of things.
That makes perfect sense. And the 6 tickets you issued, they were early on, I think, in the process, were they? Hadn't been done recently?
Yeah, they were very early on. We started with the education piece. So the first several calls we had were education. And then as the ministerial directive changed to promote enforcement, we started issuing tickets. After that, I can say that it's not like we have been not doing what we're supposed to. I think people have just responded to that, and we do still get calls, and I can imagine that councillors will get calls as well, that there's congregations of people or there's people in violation of the acts. But when we get them, they're usually anonymous, and by the time they come in, it could be several hours later, and when we investigate them, there's nothing to them, which has resulted in no more tickets being issued. So we're still looking. We still will be doing enforcement. It's just the calls aren't coming in like they did initially.
Thank you, Chief. So I'll move do we need to take a motion to accept the 2 reports? I'll move them.
I'll second that.
Mayor, Commissioner MacGillivray moves to accept the report, seconded by Commissioner Taylor. If there's no objection, report accepted. Moved. Monthly activity, Remo, and Susan Higdon, our clerk, is going to speak on it first, and then Paige will follow up.
Yes, so as I mentioned, the Regional Emergency Measures Office consists of the 6 municipalities in Pictou County. It consists of the Pictou Landing First Nation, Pictou County Shared Service Authority, the Wellness Center, the RCMP, and I think that's roughly it, who we meet with virtually. We meet now, we've just started lessening our meetings. When this first started, we were meeting every day. Then we were down to 3 times a week, and now we're down to 2. And basically what we do at each virtual meeting is we discuss the incident management team, which it consists of incident commanders for any emergency, or in this case, a pandemic that has occurred in our province. We have our emergency measures officer, who is John Davison, and the alternate, who is John DeCoste. I would like to make note that the county is in very good hands with these two gentlemen at the helm. They're very, very well up on all of the things that are going on with the provincial issues, and are good to keep us up to date. So what we do at these meetings is basically we update each other. We have a briefing with the mayors and wardens, now down to once a week, where they're kept up to speed on what's going on. We talk about logistics, basically what fire departments and what police departments need personal protective equipment. That comes down through the provincial EMO office. And so that's been ongoing. It's good to note that, while in the beginning, a lot of the hand sanitizer was hard to get, but now Nova Scotia Spirit Company has made it, and our particular police department and public works department use some hand sanitizer that was created by Nova Scotia Spirit Company. So everything that's done through personal protective equipment is done through the town of Westville. And basically, if you ever need anything with regards to gloves, goggles, anything like that, masks, hand sanitizer, then we would contact the town of Westville. The other thing that we look at is planning. And what that means is if there's a particular municipality that requires staffing from other municipalities that have the same qualifications, whether it's water department, police department, fire department, anything like that, then we can work together and make sure that that everything is fulfilled. And good to note that that's never been needed, which is good. If anybody is sick or anything like that, but that has fortunately never been needed right from the get-go. And the next thing on that is communications, and I'll go back to that so Paige can give us a little more detail on that. But then we go through each municipality and we talk about what we're doing, and we work with each other when we can. So we just give an update on what's going on in our particular municipality with regards to the police department. Chief Hobeck sits on that daily. Our town engineer sits on that, Blaine Murray. And Paige Clark, our communications coordinator, she sits on that as well. So it's a great way to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. And if one municipality has a question, we're there to answer. So a lot of the questions that are coming up now are with regards to summer programming, summer festivals, and that sort of thing. So we kind of want to make sure that we do things united. I have to say that I feel personally that the municipalities have never worked better together. It's something that we are learning as we go, because it's changing on the hour. And so one thing that happened with regards that affected the municipalities was Dr. Strang on Friday, last Friday, he lifted some restrictions where you could open parks and municipal parks. So that was a huge thing that we were able to do. And so our trails never closed, but it was never encouraged that if you had to drive there, that you would, it would decrease the social distancing aspect. So if you had to drive to a trail, that was not recommended. So, but all our recreational spaces were closed, but that has changed. Our playgrounds are still closed, and but we're just kind of waiting to see what Dr. Strang will lift in the future. Pictou Landing First Nation, they give us an update when they're available for the call. And as you've probably heard, they kind of have you just can't go in there. They have a barrier there. So that, I believe, is still in place. Heather wasn't on the call today to give us an update on that, but they are also provided personal protective equipment as well. The Pictou County Solid Waste, they're on the call. So, we were able to continue with our spring cleanup, which was fantastic. And the Pictou RCMP, you know, like as Chief Hobeck had noted, any kind of thing that they require or we require, it's been a good partnership. The Pictou County Wellness Center has been, they did a blood drive there a couple weeks ago, and they were looked at as an alternate location for some health spots as if it was needed, but fortunately was not needed. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the general what REMO does on a daily basis. And Paige, I don't know if you want, well, of course you want to continue on with communications, because I always said it's a communications team. It's of Paige, Sue Ann Music from the county, and Ken McDonald, Constable Ken McDonald from the New Glasgow Police Service. So I always say that communication is just as important as the police services, as the fire services in this sort of thing, because communication is paramount. So Paige, if you want to take it from here and kind of talk about what you've been doing.
Yeah, so I joined the communications team towards the end of March when things were really getting busy. A big part of what we've been doing communications-wise has been awareness and education for the public. We've done this through multiple different channels because we want to do as much outreach as we can. We've done radio PSAs, articles online, I think as well with the newspapers. We've done videos. We also had a mail out newsletter that kind of gave people an idea of what's kind of going on, where things have been changing. And a big part of that we really wanted to emphasize and make sure that people had was a list of community resources. So whether that was food banks or mental health lines, just different avenues in which people could go, because it's kind of hard to get through certain places now, and we just wanted to have one area so that they could go and have this information. I've also been designated as the community liaison. So if anyone within Pictou County has questions, and you know, if they don't know exactly where to go, they can come to me. And even if I don't have the answer, I've got my team, we've got our list of resources to be able to get that answer, get it back to that person to make sure that that things are where they need to be. We also meet separately as the communications team weekly. We've been doing that on Wednesdays. With those meetings, we've been doing as much planning as we can, given that things change daily. So we, you know, have a long-term goal, long-term plan that we kind of focus on. So whether that's, you know, planning for news dropping about ATVs or boating, and, you know, whether that's better earlier or wait till the long weekend in May, just to try and make sure that we're hitting the right things at the right time and not being out of date with our information. So things that we've been doing have been changing weekly. So those meetings and recording new questions, new answers to those things have been really important. Especially Friday, we had a big change, and you know, some of our things were out of date, so we wanted to make sure that we're keeping on the ball with that. But basically, we're just trying to reach everybody, because we know that there's a big difference between tech and, you know, paper, and we just want to make sure that everyone is getting the same information as best they can.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Susan, our clerk, and Chief Hobeck for sitting in on the committee. I want to thank Paige. Paige, that old saying, you say Johnny on the spot. Well, Paige has been Paige on the spot. She came in at the right time, just when we needed her. We needed communications, you're right, is paramount. And we definitely needed communications, and it's been provided. I think it's good that we had this meeting and this information's out there. Anytime that Susan sends me stuff pertaining to the COVID or whatever meetings, I always try to forward them on to the commission. I started including the Recreation Committee as well, so they keep informed of what's going on. Is there any questions anybody wants to ask Susan or Paige on it?
Thank you.
Chief Hobeck? Chief Hobeck?
Yeah, it's not a question. I wanted to make a comment, and it goes sort of back to Mayor MacGillivray's question around enforcement and such. One of the challenges we had as an agency, and many of the agencies around the province had the same challenge, was Dr. Strang came out with several suggestions for the public on what not to do, and what not to do. For example, going for a drive on Sunday from your house. He suggested not to do that for various reasons. One of the challenges we had was people were calling, making complaints because they saw somebody going for a drive, for example, and I'm only using it as an example, on a Sunday afternoon. Well, the Act doesn't prohibit you from doing that. There's nothing in the Act that we can enforce when people do that. Those are suggestions he's making to people to keep them safe and to help control the spread of the virus. However, they're not part of the acts that we can enforce. So it's a conversation we had in a conference call with Dr. Strang amongst the other chiefs of police around the province, was to try to tailor his messaging so that people would know that what he's doing is making suggestions. He's not telling them that what they're doing is in violation of any of the acts that have been brought forward because of this pandemic. So that is another challenge that we were facing. We were going on calls, but we weren't able to enforce because they're not part of the Act. They were just more suggestions on his part.
Thank you very much. No, it's good for communications. Mayor MacGillivray, you wanted to speak?
No, I'll just say thank you to the chief for that information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. Just, and the other thing I want to highlight the fact that when this whole thing took place, council turned everything over to Clerk Susan Higdon, who has been spearheading it, and Paige Clark, who has been doing the communication. So they've been doing a great job, and just so everybody knows, there is a good flow of communications between police, communities, and what have you, that everybody's working in sync. So if there's no more questions, comments, I'm going to, our next meeting will be June the 4th, 2020, and in all probability, it will be televised as well, because I don't think before the end of August or before the fall, we're going to see any gathering, and maybe not even right into the winter by the looks of things. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make
Motion to adjourn.
yeah, I'll second it.
Commissioner Atkinson, motion to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
You want to take us off broadcast,